Tonight, 3 archived stories, records that were never meant to be found.
If you're listening to this alone, turn around first. I didn't. That's why I'm recording this now. This story was sent to you because I can't keep it inside my head anymore. I don't want my name read out loud. I don't want this tied to my face. I just need it somewhere outside of me. I live alone, small apartment, 3rd floor, quiet building, the kind of place where nothing happens, which is why I installed cameras in the first place. Not for fear, just for peace of mind. I wanted proof that I was alone. The camera in the kitchen was cheap, wide angle, mounted above the cabinets, pointed toward the sink in the back door. It recorded constantly. I barely checked it. Days would go by without me opening the app. Nothing ever happened until last Tuesday night. I remember that evening clearly because it felt ordinary, too ordinary. I cooked pasta. I stood at the sink, scrolling on my phone. The apartment lights were warm, comfortable. I felt safe enough to be careless. I didn't hear anything. I didn't feel anything. That's important. Around 11:47 p.m., I went to bed. I slept through the night. No nightmares, no noises, no sense of being watched. Nothing. Then, the next morning, I checked the camera out of habit. No reason, just routine. The footage loaded slowly. I watched myself in the kitchen, alive, normal, unaware. And then I saw it. Behind me. At first, my brain refused it. Perspective trick, shadow, glitch. The camera angle distorts height. I know all the excuses because I used all of them. But the shape behind me wasn't a shadow. It had depth. It was tall, too tall to fit in the apartment properly. Its head was near the top of the frame where the ceiling cuts off. Its shoulders were narrow, wrong, like they were stretched upward instead of outward. It stood directly behind me, close enough that if I had leaned back, I would have touched it. I didn't, because I never knew it was there. I watched the footage again, and again, and again. The thing didn't move. I did. I shifted my weight. I reached for the sink. I tilted my head, but it stayed perfectly still, like it was posing. Then I noticed something worse. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, straight into the camera. Its face, I don't know how to describe it properly. Not blank, not detailed, just incomplete, like a face remembered incorrectly. But the eyes were clear, focused, intent. It knew it was being recorded. A long pause. I don't remember that moment. In the footage, I stood there for almost a full minute. The thing stayed behind me the entire time. Breathing not visible, no movement, no blur, just presence. Shaken. Then, slowly, it leaned forward. Not toward me, toward the camera. Its head lowered slightly, as if adjusting to the lens, as if it wanted to be seen clearly.
That's when my phone slipped from my hand in real life. I dropped it while watching. The sound pulled me back into my body. I realized my hands were shaking. I realized my mouth was open. I realized I couldn't remember breathing. I checked the timestamp. The thing appeared exactly 12 seconds before the clip started recording motion, which means it was already there. I called a friend. I didn't tell them everything. I laughed too much. I asked normal questions. I didn't mention the height, or the eyes, or the way it leaned. I needed someone to confirm reality still worked. That night, I slept with the lights on. I told myself it was paranoia. I told myself cameras lie. I told myself if something like that had been behind me, I would have felt it. I didn't check the footage the next morning. I waited until the afternoon, because part of me didn't want to know. The second night was worse. This time, the camera showed the kitchen empty. No me, no thing, just silence. For hours, until 2:13 a.m. The frame shifted slightly. Not enough to trigger motion alerts, just enough to notice if you were looking. Something stepped into view. It wasn't behind me this time. It was standing where I had been, facing the sink, facing the counter, facing my place. And then it turned its head toward the camera again. This time, it smiled. Not wide, not sharp, just wrong. Like a practice smile. Like it was trying to remember how I do it. A long pause. It stayed there for 11 minutes. I know because I counted. It didn't move, didn't blink, didn't sway. It just stood where I usually stand, as if waiting for me to come back. Quiet, shaking. I didn't stay in the apartment after that. I packed a bag, I left the cameras running, I stayed with my friend. I didn't explain why I kept checking my phone every few minutes. Nothing happened the third night. Nothing the fourth. Flat. Exhausted. On the fifth night, the camera recorded something again. This time, it was in the bedroom. Whispering. Terrified. Standing next to my side of the bed. Near tears. The bed was empty. But the impression on the mattress, it looked like someone had just gotten up. Voice barely audible. The thing didn't look at the camera this time. It looked at the bed, at where I should have been. Long silence. I deleted the footage. I know you're not supposed to. I know, but I couldn't let it exist. Final. Slow. I moved out last week. The landlord says the apartment is empty. The cameras are gone. But sometimes when I'm washing dishes somewhere else, small pause, I feel like I'm standing in the wrong spot, whispering, final line, and I don't turn around anymore. Because last time, I wasn't alone.
If you hear scratching above you right now, don't look up. I did. This story was sent in by a subscriber who works maintenance for commercial buildings. He asked me not to mention the city, not the company, not the building. He said it doesn't matter where this happened, because it could happen anywhere. He's been doing this job for years. Old offices, hospitals, apartment complexes, places with long corridors and low ceilings where sound travels in ways you stop questioning. Scratching in the vents wasn't unusual. At least, not at first. It started as a complaint from the third floor. Someone said it sounded like rats. Another said it sounded like something crawling slowly, stopping, then continuing. The timing was wrong. It only happened when the building was quiet. Late evenings, early mornings, never during the day. They said it sounded careful, he told me, like it didn't want to be heard. They checked the obvious things, rodent traps, cameras at access points. Nothing. No droppings, no damage, no signs of entry. But the scratching continued, and it moved. One night, it was above the third floor. The next night, the fifth. Then the second. Not random, intentional. That's when they brought in the thermal camera. Not because they were scared, because they were annoyed. The vents were warm, airflow normal, metal panels intact. And then, something showed up on the screen. A shape, humanoid, long torso, bent limbs,
its head angled unnaturally to one side, like it had learned to fit where it didn't belong. But the temperature reading was wrong. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even room temperature. It was colder than the air around it. Not dead, he said, just wrong. The shape moved when they moved the camera, not chasing it, tracking it.
It stayed inside the vent system, crawling slowly, pausing when they paused, as if it understood being watched, as if it was deciding whether to stay hidden. They argued about calling someone, management, security, police, but the shape stopped moving. It went still, perfectly still. So they did what maintenance workers always do. They opened the vent. The grate came off easily, no resistance, no dust cloud, like it had been cleaned recently. The space beyond was dark, too dark. He leaned closer with his flashlight. The beam didn't reach far. The vent seemed deeper than it should have been. And then something breathed. Not fast, not panicked, slow, controlled, right behind the metal. And a voice came from inside. Not loud, not angry, just disappointed. You weren't supposed to hear me. No one moved. No one spoke. The voice didn't echo. It sounded close, too close for the space it came from. He says that was the moment his body reacted before his mind did. He stepped back, hard, hit the wall, dropped the flashlight. Someone else swore. Someone else ran. But he stayed, because the voice wasn't finished. I was careful, it said. I stayed where you don't look. The words stretched slightly, like they weren't used often, like they were being remembered. The thing inside the vent shifted. The metal creaked, but nothing came out. He realized then that it wasn't trapped. It was choosing not to leave. The thermal camera flickered. The shape was gone, but the breathing wasn't. Someone slammed the grate back into place, screws stripped, hands shaking. No one checked if it was sealed properly. They just wanted the hole gone.
They cleared the floor, filed an incident report. Management blamed faulty equipment, stress, imagination. The building stayed open, but the scratching changed after that. It stopped moving. It stayed above one spot, above one office. The office belonged to the subscriber. He didn't work there anymore after that week, but he stayed late one night to pack his things. He didn't hear scratching then. He heard breathing above the ceiling tile, directly above his desk. He didn't look up. He packed fast, left lights on, didn't say goodbye. At home that night, he lay awake, listening. That's when he heard it again, from his apartment vent. Same breathing, same rhythm, closer. Then the whisper, soft, almost kind. I followed the quiet. He moved out 2 days later, left most of his things behind. He sent me this recording because last night, the vent in his new place was open, just slightly, like someone had checked to see if he was listening. And this time, he said, I didn't hear scratching. I heard breathing from my side of the wall.
If time ever feels like it skips, don't try to remember what you saw in the gap. I did. This story was sent by a subscriber who died for 1 minute and 42 seconds. That's what the hospital record says. Cardiac arrest, successful resuscitation,
No brain damage, full recovery. On paper. He says this recording isn't about death. It's about what waits when time stops working. He was 46, no history, no warning. He collapsed at home. Paramedics arrived fast, faster than they should have. He remembers the floor rushing up. He remembers pain, then nothing. But the nothing didn't last. He says it wasn't darkness, it wasn't light, it wasn't floating or falling. It was stillness, absolute, quiet disbelief. Time didn't move forward, it didn't move backward, it wasn't frozen, it simply wasn't there. Slow realization. He became aware of a space that existed between moments, not before a second, not after, inside the gap. And he wasn't alone. Stunned, hushed, they were already there. Uneasy, measured. He doesn't know how many. He says counting didn't make sense. They weren't arranged in rows. They didn't block his view. They stood everywhere, like markers placed in reality itself. Confused fear. They had no expressions, no movement, no breath, no posture that suggested life. But they weren't dead. They were waiting. Quiet dread. None of them looked at him. They didn't need to. The voice tightens. He says the certainty hit him instantly, the same way you know gravity exists without thinking about it. They knew. They knew who would return and who wouldn't. Some of them felt closer than others, not physically, existentially, like their presence overlapped with his thoughts, not touching, not invading, just aligned. Uneasy calm. He realized then that this place wasn't new to them. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't created for him.
They were standing there, he said, like they'd always been there. Long before ambulances, long before hospitals, long before hearts could be restarted. Time didn't pass, but something changed. One of the figures shifted. Not a step, not a turn, a change in attention, not toward him, away from him. That's when he understood the rule. If they acknowledged you, you weren't going back. He didn't move, he didn't think, he didn't pray, he didn't fight. He stayed exactly as he was. And then he felt something he couldn't explain. Pressure. Like being gently pushed back into motion. Sound rushed in. Pain followed. Then light. Then voices shouting his name. He woke up in a hospital bed. Machines beeping. Doctors smiling. A nurse crying quietly. Everyone called it a miracle. He didn't. Because something came back with him. Not physically. Temporally. He says time feels thinner now, like it stretches too easily, like seconds don't always line up the way they should. Sometimes clocks skip, sometimes words arrive before people speak them, and sometimes there are gaps, moments where everything feels paused, just long enough to notice. In those moments, he feels them again, not seeing, not hearing, just knowing they're there, standing exactly where they were before, unmoved, unchanged, patient. He says the worst part isn't knowing that death waits. It's knowing that the waiting place existed long before any of us did. A long silence. He recorded this because last night, lying awake, watching the second hand move, it stopped. Just for a fraction of a moment. And in that gap, he said, I knew they were still standing there.